What's up, guys? Hope everyone is doing well. In this video, I'm going to be going over some updates for Bitcoin. But nonetheless, go ahead and get it started here. First off, on the 4-hour chart, it looks as if Bitcoin is finally wanting to break the ascending trend here, which, as I went over in the last video, was initially support here on this point in time. So mid-December of last year, 2025, you can see that this became a resistance. Most recently, going back to around January 5th, there was this resistance here around 94.2 thousand. We saw Bitcoin retrace down to approximately 90,000. Find support along the 200 EMA. Here it is then quite violently bounced up. It's now breaking the trend again. Like I said, it looks as if this is finally the moment where it wants to solidify, flipping this trend once more and gaining a bullish sentiment above it. Although we could totally see a retracement here down to somewhere maybe, I'd say at this point probably at least lowest right here around 93,000 or so. Or we could, now that we're hitting the 800 EMA, could blow right through it, maybe start to push closer to 100,000, as I've been mentioning in recent videos or posts. Or, obviously as well, we could see a brief retracement down to around 96.5 or so, somewhere just around this ascending trend, to solidify this as a break, so as to retest it, flip it back into support as it was back here during the initial, really the formation, this being of this entire trend. Again, the next zone, like I said, is going to be somewhere around 100,000, somewhere around here, at highest somewhere around maybe like 107,000. This would be the next zone I'm personally looking out for, where we could see Bitcoin some form or fashion move up into here, likely stay here for some period of time, and then eventually continue to push back up towards even higher targets, with the next zone being somewhere around 115, 118,000. Anything after that is, at that point, going to line up with really just the prior all-time high zone here, so $122,000, give or take a few $1,000s upwards towards, obviously, $126,000 or so being the all-time high. If we look here at the 12-hour, we're seeing the 200 EMA here cross below the 800 EMA. We'll see here that this is going to trickle into the higher time frames, but before I get to explaining that, we'll see here that the price, now that it is moving up towards around 97.5, encroaching $98,000, we're seeing the price break above the 200 and 800 EMAs, solidifying support above this, perhaps seeing some movement up to the 382 again, somewhere around $100,000 would be very crucial on the 12-hour chart to see that as we go into the rest of this week, into the rest of this month. Now, when it comes to, as I pointed out here, the 200 EMA and 800 EMA, see here as I zoom in, there's been a very brief cross here that could end up flipping back above, whereas in this case we'll see the 200 EMA quickly gain dominance back above that 800 EMA, which is going to be associated with the bullish sentiment. The last time we saw this cross is going to go all the way back to here of the prior bear market. This is roughly halfway into that bear market, where as we take it from the beginning here, going all the way into the end here. So that is around mid-April 2021 to end of 2022. The midpoint was approximately right here. There's also one here briefly. This is a brief one here around the March crash of 2020. I'll get to the significance of that soon enough. Also see one here. Again, we're seeing somewhere roughly around midway or so, maybe pushing around 65% of the way into bear market. We go back here to this bear market. Again, we'll see right here, roughly, again, halfway in between those bear markets. Now, again, like I said, moving here back to the March crash of 2020, we'll see that by the time the cross happened here, the bottom was already set. Bitcoin was on its way, grinding upwards, only then to, upon finishing that price action of that slow grind, to set the precedent for leading here into October of 2020 for this entire move here, leading to around 64,000 during that 2021 bull run. So that, I think, is obviously we have two scenarios here where either we're seeing this cross that I pointed out historically is either, in most cases, actually been, like I said, around 50 to 60% of the way into a bear market. So either that's the case we're seeing here, scenario A, or we'll see scenario B, which is going to be like that of what I pointed out with the March crash, the flash crash of 2020. And I think personally, all things factored in, especially looking at the macroeconomics, the fundamental landscape, that what we are more likely than not in is scenario B. I don't think it makes much sense to say that the bear market began here, approximately 126,000, and a few months into this, we're already halfway, maybe 65% of the way done with the current bear market. To me, this seems something more like March of 2020, where this has been the most severe and intense shakeout of the current bull run. Obviously, there was the major liquidity grab with all of this as well. We move here into the daily. We'll see that the price is finally breaking above the upper bound of the 50 EMA band. 200 EMA sitting here around, again, approximately $100,000. So we could very well be seeing the earliest moments of Bitcoin's move up to this zone here. Again, like I said, around $105,000, $107,000 or so, where we'll see the price hit the zone, likely, in my opinion, sit here and do something for a period of time, whether it's sideways action or if it's a more deep retracement, maybe back down to around mid 90,000s. But this is really the most notable zone that is above, and then outside of that, we're looking at really kind of the median between the all-time high here and this local low set here. So that's, again, anywhere from around $115,000, $116,000, give or take a few $1,000s. We'll also see that the RSI here is peaking its head above the 618. As in the last video, I pointed this out. Every time we see this, going back even further, which I won't do in this chart, but for example, here you can see each of these times we see this happening is going to be correlating with these notable moves upwards in price. And again, that can be validated by going back even further. Stock RSI is remaining in the upper bound, which is going to be good for bullish momentum. We're seeing potentially the MACD, obviously right now, as you can see, it's currently bullish, but flipping the 0 point here, moving into more notably bullish territory, continuing on higher, continuing to release the momentum that has been built up during this consolidative sideways period. Also, if we look here at the RVI, we'll see that it is pushing upwards towards the upper bound of the Bollinger Bands. It could see an extension of the RVI itself out of the Bollinger Bands, lining with a move upwards towards likely somewhere around this yellow zone, as I've pointed out. And currently the ASO is showing a bullish sentiment, a dominating bullish sentiment. If we look here at the 2-day, we'll see, first thing I want to point out here is the 50 EMA crossing below the 200 EMA. So this is the, as I pointed out on the 12-hour with those two EMAs, this is now on the 2-day, the analog for that. So this is the trickle up effect, as I mentioned earlier, but we'll see that cross on the 12-hour. Now if we look here at the 2-day, we'll see again the cross here. This time it's the 50 and the 200. We'll go all the way back again to here, around 50-60% of the way into this bear market, 2021 and 2022. Here again back in 2018 and 19, going all the way to here, 2014, even going back even further now here on the 2-day chart. We'll see that the first time this happened actually correlated with right at the bottom, phase 1 of cycle 2 in this bear market back in quarter 4 of 2011. And the trend here is, as we've seen Bitcoin mature from cycle to cycle, phase to phase, you can see here, as I already pointed out, that this line, 50 going below the 200 lines up with the bear market bottom, and then we see it start to fall back in time a bit, whereas this time around here we can see, as it happened here in 2014 during phase 2 of cycle 2, that it then transitioned to the, like I said, 50-60%, roughly the midpoint of the bear market. So far this has continued to uphold well enough at this point. Again, now here we can see the cross of 2018. That's a part of phase 1 of cycle 3. We saw here it happened as well. As I pointed out, we're still at this point in phase 1 of cycle 3. We're seeing a very, very extended phase 1 of cycle 3, comparatively speaking, in terms of looking at it next to phase 1 of cycle 2, falling in line with the maturation of Bitcoin, the extending of the phases and the cycles, the fact that the bull markets become longer, such as do the bear markets, and in the same fashion, we see that the bull markets over time are becoming less bullish. There's just not enough strength left in the tank over time as Bitcoin continues to mature. As it gets older, starts to become a lot more meticulous and measured and kind of strategic, rather than just these major one and done pumps that we saw back. Really, the most recent one would have been here back in 2020 to 2021. And then obviously going back even further to 2016, 17, back in 2011 and 10. And so we see this again line up, and I didn't point it out yet, but we also see here the cross back March 2020, 50 below the 200 EMA, just like the 12-hour chart and those analogous EMAs on that lower time frame. And so as we see here, we're now continuing to move up in the price. We're facing the EMA band towards the upper bound now, lining up with approximately $100,000. So getting above this is going to then eventually, on these lower time frames that I've gone over, it's going to be correlating with the price getting above the most notable resistance zone of around, as I've mentioned various times, 100 to around $105,000, $107,000 or so. We really can just kind of broaden that to around $100,000 to $110,000 to give more of a psychological region. Then by the time we see this happen, we could see a straight shot upwards towards the zone of, like I said, the last one ending at around 110,000 as a broadened zone, then pushing up to around $115,000, $116,000, $118,000. As I mentioned, that's kind of the, going back on here, the daily, the median, if we were to box off this price. So we could see this is kind of the distribution zone of the most recent all-time high. And we can see that the midline of this is going to be around $116,000 or so. So by the time we see this, depending upon whether or not, we could, by the end of this month, see Bitcoin pushing $110,000, $116,000, $117,000, perhaps bleeding likely into February, if I had to imagine. I'd say, by the end of February, the highest we could be is somewhere back around all-time highs. So let's say anywhere above and in between the zone of $120,000 to $130,000. I'd be quite surprised if we would see Bitcoin over $130,000. I'd have to imagine if at earliest that would be late February going into early March, where then we would likely start to then hit this ascending resistance here, somewhere around like $130,000 to $140,000, or as a more precise range, $130,000 to $135,000. Now, if we also, I'll go back here to the daily to show this. We could also draw out a ascending triangle here as well. The price target for this is going to be obviously here roughly the height, which is going to then at this point take the price back up into this yellow zone. So if we do indeed, and we have been seeing this price pattern form here, then we clearly are seeing a breakout right now, which would take it up into the yellow zone. On the 2-day, again, that's going to take it anywhere upwards towards around this zone right along here. Likely would see some form of choppiness, some form of correction, if I had to imagine, unless it just blows straight up into this zone here, pushing closer towards $116,000, $120,000 or so, going to the rest of this month and into February. Lastly, here on the weekly, before I get to the ASO and updating that, we'll see on this chart that we see there's red EMA here. That's the 13 EMA. Cross below the 50 EMA. This is going to be on here now here on the weekly, analogous to what I showed on the 2-day chart with those EMA pairs, and also going back to the 12-hour chart. So we're seeing again these 3 charts. We're seeing this trickle effect where we see a transition between the relationships of these EMAs, pointing to the exact same conclusion, where again I'll go back and we can see here the crossover happening here for March of 2020, 2018 bear market, 2014 bear market, and then lining up with the bear market low of 2011. And again, the most comparable instance to now would be March of 2020. The vast majority of the time I've seen these crossovers was, as I've said plenty of times, roughly midway into a bear market. Again, signaling, to reiterate it now, since we're on the highest time frame I'll be going over in this video, either we are around 50 to 60% into the current bear market, which began at around $126,000, or we are in a situation more within relationship to what happened back in March of 2020, leading into a very parabolic move. Now, due to the maturation of Bitcoin over time and what I was explaining about the cycles and how they're changing, the personalities changing over time, they're just not as strong as they used to be. Due to this, I don't think we'll see something like 2020. I don't think we'll see a move this strong, but I do think we will see quite a strong move. Again, to typify the current structure of the bull run, we're seeing a 5-stage impulse move, I believe, where we see the first 2 legs here, where we can see that these two over time, they are getting larger and larger. There's more power behind them, and they do last a little bit longer. Whereas we see here with, again, so we see the first move, the first correction, second move, second correction, and this entire move right here, I believe, is what would be the third and final bullish leg of the overall 5-stage impulse move that is being seen here. And what we're mainly seeing as a difference this time around is the intermediate consolidation here, which is ascending, has been abnormally extended in comparison to the midway consolidation periods of this leg here, the second leg here, and the first leg here. And they're also each, if I were to go down to the 2-day here, you can see how they will also just look very similar. We see these first two here were more megaphone-like structures, where we can see that a high is made, higher high, and then there's a lower low set right here after this low. So we see, again, kind of like a megaphone structure, whereas this time around we're seeing something different. Instead of seeing high here, low, higher high, maybe we still have another lower low to make. Maybe we'll see here on this 2-day chart rejection right around here into a lower low, and we'll meet this megaphone structure, and we actually see Bitcoin come down to approximately $70,000 and then manage to bounce from there to further higher highs. That's potentially the scenario that could end up unfolding. As I've said plenty of times in recent videos, losing this horizontal zone here I do not think is good at all. It's really, in my personal view, the worst thing that could happen, losing this macro horizontal support, because so far that has not happened in the current bull run structure, and losing that structure will just not, in my view, again, portray a good state of health of a bull run. But in this context, perhaps we are seeing a bull, a megaphone like pattern play out here, or we are seeing a difference in the sense that this time we're seeing, rather than the megaphone, we're seeing just kind of an ascending channel that's acting as the kind of bridge, the connector point between the two bullish legs that we would see here. Even if, again, going back, we see this overall move here, but it's broken into 2 different legs. One here, 2. This overall move here is broken into the first leg, second leg, right, and then here for the third move and final move, as I am speculating, the first leg here, consolidation, correction, second leg here, leading anywhere upwards towards perhaps facing final rejection here to end the bull run, somewhere around pushing $140,000 or so, maybe waking up to around $145,000, $150,000. But I think it's definitely possible to see Bitcoin reach around 170 here, upwards towards, around $220,000, $230,000, $250,000 or highest by sometime around spring, maybe pushing early summer of this year. Because take a look here at the ASO. As I've went over in the last video, we'll see a trend here with the resistance of the bearish sentiment. That's going to be the black line, as you see here, and then the bullish sentiment support. The white line is the bullish sentiment, and each of these times we've seen this happen along these trends. We've seen the bearish sentiment wane here, finding resistance. You can see that this is lined up with these lows for each of these moves, and even going back to this instance here, which isn't a part of this trend right here, but nonetheless it's still playing the same role within the, going back to here, the beginning of the current bull run. You can see that there's these brief periods of the bearish sentiment gaining dominance, and then once we see the flip here, you can see this move, this move, this move, and we're heading into what I think is at least one more move towards, at lowest, somewhere around $130,000, $140,000, finding for the third time resistance. Well, I guess in total, if you want to count all of them, 5, but within the current, we'd see 1, 2, and then 3 here, but overall it'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5. But this is an ascending resistance zone that's been intact. It was set and formed during the double top of the prior bull run back in 2021. But so far we're seeing this as if it is appearing to validate once more, meaning that we will eventually see Bitcoin back up at prior all-time highs and likely making new all-time highs, at least somewhere ending around approximately $140,000, if not going quite significantly higher than that. Again, this will be the last thing that I point out. Each of these overall bullish impulses within this overarching structure have ended during springtime of, for example, here in 2023, here springtime of 2024, and had we not seen such an abnormal extension here with the bridge, the connection point of the two legs here of each of these overall stages within this impulse structure, then we would have seen Bitcoin top out in the bull run during springtime of 2025, which would have been somewhere right along here. So instead of seeing this extension here, we would have seen Bitcoin going sideways right here and then move up to the all-time high here rather than extending into what we're seeing now. I think it could very well be that we are seeing a extension of this into the next year, prolonging it by about a year or so, and now we're going to see as a thesis I'm making, Bitcoin top out during spring, perhaps, you know, bleeding into summer, due to the way that this is all just kind of progressively kind of decaying over time, and we're seeing this lengthening over time. And it's not just really in more of a macro sense from phase to phase or cycle to cycle. It's constantly decaying and constantly lengthening itself is really, I feel like, the observation that I'm making watching the price of this day in and day out and year after year. And so, and which is something I think is only going to continue to become more and more prevalent and worse over time, meaning that the upcoming bear market, I think, is going to be quite grueling and agonizing to put up with and go through, because I think it's going to be quite long, and it's just going to really test the endurance and patience of a lot of people that invest in the market, especially as more and more people, as newcomers, come into the space of crypto, blockchain solutions, Bitcoin, and everything else. And also to make the point about, we're seeing this extension into, you know, if I end up being correct, or if it's roughly correct to some degree, around springtime, early summertime of 2026, the whole 4-year cycle. This would then line up with it. This 4-year cycle, I think, is clearly not going to be something that's always present in Bitcoin. I think that 4-year cycle idea is going to extend. And in this context, if Bitcoin ends up topping out sometime around my proposed and speculated time zone, a range of time, then we would be seeing an extension of this 4 years pushing into around 5 years. And depending upon how this goes over the next number of decades, you know, maybe it's going to be 4 years, and then it'll turn to 5 for a number of cycles, and then it'll turn into 6 for a number of cycles, or maybe it won't be that linear. I'd have to imagine it won't be that linear, because that just seems a bit too good to be true and a bit too easy. But anyways, that was the final point that I wanted to make. So as always, none of this is meant to be financial advice, but all of that said and everything gone over, I hope you all enjoyed, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.